So, our next speaker, Filipa Lacerda from GitLab.
Thank you. So I hope you enjoyed your break. First, I wanted to thank Commit Porto for the invitation to be here. And just need my slides to start.
They don't like you.
Okay, here they are. So welcome to an overview, a tale of speed and maintainability. So today I'm going to talk to you about why we use Vue and Vue.js at GitLab and what we've learned so far. But first, a bit about myself. My name is Filipa Lacerda, and I am a senior front-end engineer at GitLab. And on my free time, I write technical blog posts for Alligator. You can find me on those links. So before I can explain you why and how we use Vue and Vuex at GitLab, I need you to tell you a bit about the company and a bit about how we work, because our vision and our values, they play a huge role in our technical decisions. So we are about 300 team members. The time I made this slide, we were 300. We are a bit more now, and about 70 pets. And so far, there's nothing different about us here. But unlike most companies, we have 0 offices. And this means that everyone works from wherever they want to. So we have team members in 40 different countries and regions. And GitLab is an open source project. But not only GitLab is open source, the project itself, but everything about us is open. Our company is completely open. Our issues are open, our code reviews are open, our future vision and all the plan is open, and our internal handbook is open. So if you want to check our time off policy, you can. It's everything is open. So in our handbook, we have a section about our values, and they are all equally important, but for the purpose of this talk, I'm going to focus on only 3 of them. Results, efficiency, and iteration. And what this means is that we track outcomes, we don't track hours. That we care about the things we achieve, the user we make happy, the code we ship, and the team member we have helped. It means that we have a sense of urgency, that we try to get results out as fast as possible. And by iteration, we mean that everything we do is a draft. We trust that we will know a lot better how to proceed after something is released. So this is the part about our culture that plays a big role in our technical decisions. But what about the product? What is GitLab, and why do we need Vue? So for the ones of you that don't know this, GitLab is a lot more than a Git repository. It enables anyone to collaborate, and it has every step of the process to solve a problem. So from the planning phase, the creation phase, to verify, package, release, everything. And we have a plenitude of features. We have issues, we have issue boards, Gantt maps. Obviously, we have a Git repository, merge requests, code reviews, security checks, CI/CD, so many codes. We even have a web IDE. So just one more thing before we go into our tech stack that also plays an important role in our technical decisions is that we ship a new release every month. So every month on the 22nd, there is a new version of GitLab. So now that you're probably all asleep with the introduction, let's get to the codes. GitLab is a Rails-based application. And for the front end, what this means is Rails will take an YAML template and will give us rendered HTML. It's basically a server-side rendered application. So if you're at least 30, you are most likely familiar with jQuery. And although it was great at the time, it is no longer the most performant tool to heavy DOM manipulation. So, and most importantly, it would take forever to do anything in jQuery. So if you ever used it, you know that the simplest thing like rendering an array of users and handling, clearing the DOM afterwards, making sure no events were there, it used to be a lot more painful than it is nowadays. So about 2 years ago, we started to make some changes into our front-end code base. First, we converted all of our CoffeeScript into JavaScript with the help of Babel. So for the ones of you that don't know, by the time we started GitLab, I think it was around 2011, Rails would come with a CoffeeScript solution. On top of that, we added Webpack, and we started to use the code splitting tool. So all the code at GitLab used to be attached to the window object. We didn't use code splits on everything right away because we still wanted to keep shipping features, but it enables us to be there now. And on top of that, we added linters, and we even changed NPM for Yarn, and the main reason for that was the lock feature. And then, on top of that, we added Vue, which is the tool that has empowered us the most. So this is one of our first features built in Vue. Not the first one, but I think the bigger one. And if you are familiar with the concept of Kanban boards, this is basically Kanban boards. This is our issue boards. You have boards, you can add boards, delete boards, and then you have issues. You can drag them around. Every time you drag them to a different board, they will get a new state. You can then assign milestones. There is a lot of DOM manipulation over here. So do you have any idea how long did it took us to build this feature? Yeah, it took us 1 month. So when we started to add real-time features or features with a lot of DOM manipulation, if we still wanted to do them in one release cycle, doing them with jQuery or plain JavaScript would either be impossible or would result in a lot of bugs. It's not everything on the tool. It requires amazing developers to build all that in 1 month. So if you ever used the issue boards and feel like thanking anyone, Phil and Douglas are the ones to thank. So besides our development speeds, why do we choose Vue? So for the ones that don't know, Vue is a progressive framework for building user interfaces, and it's focused on the view layer, but also offers a Flux-like inspired pattern to handle the state management. And exactly because the core library is focused on the view layer only, it makes it super easy to pick and integrate with any library. So if you're starting the project and you only have a couple of views to do, or if you're starting the project and have huge data sets to handle, or if, like ourselves, you already have a project, Vue will most likely improve your developer experience. Also, it's super performant. It's a lightweight library. The minified version is about 20 kilobytes, and the virtual DOM feature is also super fast. So one of Vue's key features, it's the component system. And because of this abstraction, it allows us to build large-scale applications composed of small, self-contained, and hopefully reusable components, pretty much the same as React. And often, when you are creating a large application with composable components, the internal state of each component is not enough. So in Vue, the parent-child communication system can be translated as props go down and events go up. So the parent will provide data down to the child via props, and the child will talk to the parent via events through an event emitter. And also, the syntax is the simplest. This is everything you need to do to mount a Vue application. So this is what a component looks like. So in a Vue component, you need to explicitly declare all the data you want to receive. You need to use the props object for that. It doesn't matter if you provide all the data down. If you don't declare them in the props object, the component won't listen to them. Vue allows you to define the type of property that you are expecting, also to set it as required or not property. You can even set a default value. And in Vue, the way you define an internal state of the component is through the data function. You just return your state. You can also see that Vue also handles native click events. So it's very straightforward. So Vue compiles the templates into virtual DOM render functions. And it's smart enough to calculate the minimal number of components that need to re-render every time the state updates. And the components, like you saw, they use an HTML-based template syntax that allows us to declaratively bind the render DOM into the template. So Vue has a lot of more built-in features like conditional rendering, list rendering, form input bindings, class and style bindings, and the event handling we already covered. So Vue seemed to check all the boxes for us. It was technically great. It improved our development speed. The documentation it still is very good. And it's very, very easy to learn. So did we rewrite our entire product in Vue? No. Did you forget about these values? Rewriting an entire product wouldn't be the most boring solution ever. So how do we handle two different code bases in the same application? Because we still have YAML, we still have jQuery, we still have Bootstrap, which is a jQuery-based library, and then we have Vue. So this is how we started. This is the first architecture that we implemented. So most applications would have one Vue application on them. So instead of one, we have one per page. So basically, Rails will serve the YAML template, and there is some data that we only have access through the YAML template. So we provide them to the JavaScript through data attributes, and we then have a bundle file that will mount our application. We then have our main component, which is usually called the smart component, that is responsible to talk to the service and the store, and it will provide all the data down. But in some pages, and due to technical debt, either because we didn't have time to refactor the entire page in a month, either because the API wasn't ready for all the data that we needed, or because there was no value in changing everything into Vue because the user would never notice, in some pages we need more than one Vue application. So we handle that through a mediator, which is basically our main component, but just simple JavaScript that will talk to the service, the store, and provide the data down. So let me give you an example. So this is the pipelines page, and in this page we have two Vue applications, which is the header and the pipeline. So the reason why we use this mediator pattern is because in order to render the pipeline and in order to render the header, we have to pull the same endpoint, and the state is the same, it's shared between them. So we would have to pull two endpoints at the same time if we wouldn't use this mediator pattern. So what about more complex states? As we started to add more and more Vue applications, and as we started to have more complex Vue applications, we understood that handling the state ourselves wasn't a great idea. So we added Vuex to achieve a better state management. So Vuex is inspired on Flux, on React, and in the Elm architecture. And we use it exactly like the documentation says. Our Vue components dispatch actions. Our actions, some of them will talk to the API. They will commit mutations. The mutations will mutate the state, and our components will re-render accordingly to the state change. So this is how we structure our Vue code. And let's think of an application that everything it does is it renders users. So we have meaningful actions. We have a meaningful flow. And what this means is, if you notice, our component will only dispatch an action called fetch users. From there, our component doesn't know about any other actions. Only this action will dispatch another action, and only that action will commit a mutation to toggle the loading state that the user will see loading. So the reason why we use this pattern is, first, is human readable. So before we implemented this, we used to have a lot of code that would call an action called toggle loading everywhere. And we get it, toggle loading will toggle loading. It's easy to understand, but why? And why now? Why not in some method or another part of the life cycle? So this makes it has a human flow it adds a human flow to our code. The second reason, they are very, very easy to test like this, because only one of our functions needs to mock a request to the API. The others just commit mutations. And third of all, if you have a huge team, it's important to find a simple pattern that you all will write similar code. So how do we test all of this code? So to test our code, we still use Karma and Jasmine. We have updated a lot of libraries, but tests weren't one of them. We are talking about updating into Jest. So to explain you how we test Vue and Vuex code, let's use this dummy component that everything it does receives a prop and it renders the prop. So for these smaller and reusable components, and what I mean by this is for the components that don't know neither about the store or the service in the old pattern, or the components that don't know about Vuex in the new pattern, these are the easiest to test. So the way we look at components is they are a pure function. You give them props, they will always return the same render result. So we test the render output. So in this component, it's very simple, but if we would have a button that adds user interaction, we would test the render output after the user interaction. And unless there are computed properties or methods that are very, very complex to test, we only test the render function. So let's take the same components and let's make it access the store instead of receiving a prop. So now, in order to test them, we need to tell them about the store. So what we do is we create an instance of the store. There's an error on that line. We dispatch an action to set the data that we need to check for, and then we mount the component. Same as before, we test the render output. And for components that do require communicating with the backend API, because we use Axios mock adapter to test them. So to test Vuex actions, what we do, we created, well, the documentation has an helper to test Vuex actions. At the time, it wasn't very complete, so we extended it a bit. So basically what we do is we have a function that receives the action we want to test. If it's going to talk to the backend API, we will provide the mocked response for that. We provide the state, and then if our action commits mutations, we provide an array of the mutations we are expecting to be committed. If our action dispatches other actions, we do the same. We provide an array with the actions we expect to be dispatched. And well, mutations are the easiest ones to test. They just change an object. We just call the mutation, send the state, send the data we need to change, and check if the object has changed. So during this process, we had a few challenges. And we will have more, because as I told you before, every time we ship something, we learn more. We always know better how to go from there. The architecture we have today, it took us about a year to get there. So as I was saying, not everything was perfect. So when we started Vuex, when we started using Vue, Vuex wasn't yet a thing. And neither was linters, or neither there was a style guide. So we are about 17 front-end developers. And when we started using Vue, every developer has a way of writing code. And we reached a point that every Vue application had a different style. So we had to write our internal style guide. We were lucky enough that that style guide inspired the official one. So when we finally had linters, we didn't have to change anything because it was already compliant. So the same happens with Vuex. The pattern I showed you is not documented in Vuex documentation. It's actually inspired by the Redux one. And the same with tests. When we started, there was no documentation on how to test a Vue component. And if you have a team with, if you have a big team, and if not everyone is familiar with React, which is, I think, the most common framework to relate to Vue, it's difficult to have everyone in the same page. So there were a few challenges. There will be more. Our documentation is all public. You can check those links if you want. So what are our next steps? We have a lot of single-page applications right now. For every route, almost, we have a new Vue application. So right now we are working to build a UI component library. We won't reinvent the wheel. We will use something that is already out there. We already have some common components that we have created so far, so we will reuse them. And our goal is to have bigger single-page applications. So instead of having 2 per page, or one for the index route and the other for the show route, we will have one, and we will let Vue router handle everything from there. So at GitLab, everyone can contribute. And what I mean by this is if you use GitLab and you miss a feature, you can create an issue and talk to us about it. And if you feel like fixing a bug, you are more than welcome. And I hope you have enjoyed. Not sure if you have, you can, yeah.
Questions? You're fixing the hair? Or, okay. Over there. Keep your hand. Yes, please.
Hey. Thanks. So what we do is Rails handles the router. So for every new page you hit, Rails will render everything, will render the HTML on the server side. After that, in some pages, we mount Vue applications, but not in all of them.
So all the rendering is made from the server, not from the, oh, okay, I understand. Thank you.
It's stacked up.
Anyone else? Over there. Afterwards, anyone else? They're afraid.
Thank you, Filipa. I wonder, during your presentation, you referenced React a lot, but you still use Vue. Looking back at the decision of adopting Vue instead of React, do you still think that was a good decision? And if so, can you elaborate on why?
Well, at the time, there were some issues with React license that we couldn't use. I wasn't at GitLab when the decision was made, but the same question was asked to us this week and to the person that made the call. We would do it again. First of all, because Vue community is very similar to the GitLab community. So GitLab has more than, I think, 2,000 contributors, and the same happens with Vue. It's not built by a company. And if you're talking like only technically speaking, I think Vue is easier. Like if you ever, before Vue and before React, if you ever worked with Backbone and Ember or Angular, Backbone would be a lot simpler. And it's the same comparison. So it's a lot, Vue is just an object. React, you need to learn a lot more. But technically speaking, they are very similar, yes.
Yep. But then you have to use Vuex to tackle some of the things that you have in React that you do not have in Vue, I believe. You probably know it better than I do. So still today, do you think it was still a good option to go with Vue instead of React?
Yeah, so I've worked, before joining GitLab, I was working with React. Vuex doesn't solve any problem that React solves. Vuex solves what Redux solves. So we would still need 2 libraries.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any questions over there? We should have a mic to throw.
It's going to be a biased question. It's coming from my husband, so let's see.
No, it's a legit question. So you render HTML from the server with the HAML templates. Then how do you provide the information when you mount the components with Vuex? Because they are kind of different.
Yeah, so there is a lot of information that we only have access in the server, and we don't have an API call to make. So what we do is we provide them through data attributes. It's not great. We would love to have an API to make that call, but so far it's the possible solution.
Thank you.
You already knew the answer, though.
I hate you, personally. Really? These guys with white shirts, you shouldn't like them. They are just...
With Greek things, not just white shirts.
Congratulations for the talk. Very
Thanks.
interesting. My question is actually about Rails. I don't know. Do you do Rails? Can I ask something?
Not much, but maybe, well, give it a try.
Why HAML?
I think it's the out-of-the-box solution at a time. So we've started to move away from, for some microservices, we started to use Go, but I think it was what it came with Rails at the time. And because we have this goal that we ship features every new month, so we never stop to actually go remove all the technical debt. So yeah.
Okay. ERB is better.
Well, thank you.